Return of the Mount Hua Sect, Chapter 154. Let me show you what true heartlessness looks like. Cho Myung-san's hand trembled slightly. What's with him? His gaze fixed on the young disciple who had stepped forward. There was nothing special about him, nor could any tremendous ki be felt from him. Even so, Cho Myung-san couldn't take his eyes off this young disciple from the moment he stepped forward. Seriously, is this feeling for real right now? A chill was running down his spine. He had earned the name Yangtze Black Blade through countless fierce battles. In other words, Cho Myung-san was not some greenhorn that developed his skills in comfort, but someone that had grown through constant struggle. So he could tell just by looking at the opponent. Was this just a kid with talent, or was he an experienced warrior? If it was just some kid with talent, then there was nothing to be afraid of. Cho Myung-san had defeated many opponents stronger or more talented than himself. A sword prepared to kill isn't afraid of talent. But what is up with this guy? His senses kept warning him, telling him that it was dangerous. The child standing before him was a serious threat. His muscles contracted tightly as his hand gripped his sword. He gulped desperately, trying to quench his dry throat. Cho Myung-san couldn't understand what he was feeling right now. This person was clearly still a child, fresh from his mother's milk. Although he was a disciple of Mount Hua, he shouldn't know the world's cruelties. It was only recently that Mount Hua restarted their outside activities and began to let its disciples venture into Gangho. Yet, Cho Myung-san's senses were screaming at him that this disciple in front of him was an old monster who had fought countless battles. This child was the most dangerous enemy. If they met on the battlefield, then the only course of action would be to run away without looking back. How could that even be possible? Thick drops of sweat began to flow down Cho Myung-san's forehead. It made no sense, but he already knew that Gangho was a place where things that exceeded common sense occur incessantly. If the bones of those that died, clinging on to an idyllic notion of common sense, were collected, they could fill any lake one could imagine. To survive in the martial world, it was better to trust one's own senses rather than a common sense that constantly gets forced to adapt. Don't belittle that child. It was a simple statement that Cho Myung-san had struggled to bring up only after much deliberation, but not a single person there could understand. Dera Sword smiled and looked at him. What are you talking about? Are you joking right now? It seems like there's something even Yangtze Black Blade is afraid of. What are we going to do if you get cold feet after seeing one disciple? Ma Kui openly laughed. Cho Myung-san didn't get angry despite their words and jokes. He didn't think they would understand what he felt. Even he wasn't fully convinced despite his senses trying to convey such an absurd warning. So how could they understand? If you are scared, just stay back. I'll take care of him. Dera Sword laughed and stepped forward with a sneer. But Cho Myung-san had no thoughts of dissuading him. He had already given one warning. There was no need to dissuade someone that was arrogantly walking into danger. They were simply working together for a while. They had no intentions of being friends. Dera Sword stepped ahead and looked down at Chongmyung. You said that you're going to show me what true heartlessness looks like. Chongmyung didn't respond. Seeing that, the man laughed. Such a young kid doesn't seem to understand fear. Or has that sense of justice of yours set your heart on fire? Chongmyung looked at Dera Sword without another word. I'll tell you one thing, boy. In Gangho, that sense of justice is useless. Chivalry and honor belong to those with power. Diplomacy is the same. Trying to negotiate without power is just nonsense. You're about to learn that today. Of course, the price is going to be your life. Chongmyung looked at him and said, Are you done? What? I asked if you're finished yet, or are you going to continue prattling on? Dera Sword's eyes became fierce. This little brat has a nasty mouth. Chongmyung narrowed his eyes. He slowly began to walk toward Dera Sword, as if any further conversation was meaningless. The plum blossom sword swayed as Chongmyung held it naturally in his hand and continued his silent approach. A strange sense of pressure began to weigh on Dera Sword. You! Dera Sword was enraged and about to yell when Chongmyung expressionlessly cut him off. Well, weren't you going to kill me anyway? Dera Sword was silent. Then all there is to do is kill. That was correct. No matter how Chongmyung had reacted, Dera Sword planned to kill him. They were here instead of the other door because they intended to kill every bit of competition that entered. So like Chongmyung said, their aim was to kill him. Whether the opponent was arrogant, ignorant, or scared, they wouldn't care about such things. The ones that came before him didn't act like this. The cold corpses scattered across the ground had all cursed and pleaded as they died. But did Dera Sword spare their lives? He scoffed at their reactions, looked down on them, and laughed as he severed their lives. But why was he so bothered about Chongmyung's reactions, and why did he try to talk to him? Dera Sword bit his lip. He felt like he must look like a frightened puppy right now. Wolves don't howl before hunting. They simply rush in, bite, and kill their prey. Only frightened dogs raise their voices and bark to avoid fighting. What nonsense. Why was Dera Sword scared? Because of that Mount Hua and Beggars Union? What a joke. The people he had killed in this room could tear open the heads of any Beggars Union or Mount Hua disciple with their bare hands. So why was he afraid of such a disciple now? Clench. He gripped the large sword in his hand more tightly. The muscles in his body were all clenched and taut. Right. Let's see if he can still talk like that with a sword down his throat. Dera Sword raised his sword against Chongmyung. But until that moment, he hadn't realized that something was wrong. Dera Sword anger was bizarre in itself. It should be something to laugh at when a hopeless kid fearlessly risks his life. It wasn't something to get angry about. If only Dera Sword hadn't been so drunk on his emotions, he might have noticed it. But it wasn't until the very end that he realized it as he hastened forward. Step, step, step. Dera Sword was shocked as he glared at Chongmyung, who looked indifferent. His huge sword, which was several inches longer than a standard blade, aimed for Chongmyung's head as it cut through the air. Kang! But Chongmyung's head wasn't split in half. Before the sword could even reach his target, Chongmyung lightly deflected that large sword. He stopped it. A kid's block had blocked his attack. Anger and bewilderment simultaneously pierced Dera Sword's heart. However, he was a man of Gangho with a strong sense of pride. His panic only lasted a moment before he recovered his sword and aimed another strike at Chongmyung's side. Swish! A deep blue key resonated on the blade as it sliced at Chongmyung. Kang! But this time as well, the same sight repeated. The sword failed to reach Chongmyung's body and was bounced back again. Had it really been blocked again? No, that's not what's important. The important thing wasn't that Dera's sword attack had been blocked, but the fact that he had never seen Chongmyung's sword move to block his attacks. It was as if the sword broke through space to suddenly appear there. Instead of moving to block, it seemed to manifest in the right place. Impossible. It seemed like nonsense. I am Dera Sword. Even if the opponent was a first-class disciple from a great sect, they would still be nervous against him. But this child, Chongmyung, was stronger than him. That cannot happen. Ah! Dera Sword let loose a furious bellow, but Chongmyung remained unfazed as his gaze stayed firm. Dera Sword swung wildly once again. The sword was filled with his determination to kill the opponent. It was a series of deadly strikes that did not allow any hope for his opponent to survive. Kang, kang, kang. Not a single move was executed randomly. Every attack was aimed to kill. Yet Chongmyung had blocked them all. Despite unleashing 10 swift strikes instantly, every one of them bounced back without reaching Chongmyung's body. Despair began to creep into Dera Sword's eyes. You! The young swordsman had a blue shine on his sword. Realizing that precision and speed wouldn't be enough to win, Dera Sword changed techniques and began to try and overwhelm his opponent with his ki. No matter how strong Chongmyung was, he was still young. Therefore, Dera Sword was certain of victory once he dragged him into a battle of ki. After all, it was common sense. No matter how gifted a child is, they can't overcome the gap in time. However, there was one problem. Common sense didn't apply to Chongmyung. Ta! A sword carrying the Danjon's internal ki rushed for Chongmyung. The sword appeared to double in size compared to before as it swelled in strength. A menacing force as if it would split the opponent's skull in two. However, Dera Sword quickly realized that he had made the wrong choice. Pang! The moment his massive sword struck, Chongmyung's sword moved twice as fast as it had before. And Dera Sword saw it then. The way his sword soared into the sky. A sword coated in deep blue ki bounced high in the sky. The moment he saw his hand, still clasping the sword as it flew away, the word despair engraved itself deeply into his mind. The last thing he saw as he lowered his head was the emotionless eyes of Chongmyung coldly staring at him. No anger, no animosity. How could anyone look at another person with such eyes? How could a child have such eyes? Steadily, Chongmyung passed by Dera's sword at a pace that was neither fast nor slow. Just as a question was about to rise in Dera's sword's head. Huh? The word slowly began to tilt. Everything he saw flipped upside down and rotated as if the sky and earth were overturned. What is this? The earth was rising and the sky was falling. His question remained unresolved as a familiar yet unfamiliar sight entered Dera's sword's vision. A human body. The man's body standing there was far too familiar to Dera's sword, but it looked unfamiliar too. He had never seen his own body from this angle before. Moreover, when would he ever see his own body without the head? No. That was the last thought the man had in this world. Thud. Dera's sword's body, which had lost its head, fell to the ground. Cha! A fountain of blood poured from the neatly severed neck and soaked Chongmyung's feet. However, Chongmyung softly spoke without even looking at the fresh corpse he had created. Next,